Good evening, welcome along to NUFC Matters, this time on Skype, so again a slightly different format, but big good evening to the Chronicle's John Gibson.
Hello, good evening.
Hope you're well, John. I hope you're well. Good to see you again and have a chat about Newcastle United and what is going on at our club. We'll start with a takeover. Is no news good news, John?
Well, I'm beginning to think that way because no news means it isn't off, and that's some help. But honestly, this takeover has become like trying to push a steamroller up a hill with only one hand. It's just become a grind and a grind and a grind, and we desperately need it to be taken care of. I've always had a feeling in recent times, Steve, as we said the last time we talked on air, that before the World Trade Organization report comes out, we would not hear anything from the Premier League. I think they want that in the public domain first, over the TV piracy, of course. But the longer this goes on, the more exasperated we've become. And surprise, surprise, Mike Ashley's become exasperated. He's going to demand that the Premier League tell him what's happening. That's rich coming from Ashley, isn't it? Who's avoided all talk of talkovers and dragged his heels in the past. If ever we knew that he's already washed his hands on Newcastle United and handed over the keys because he's on his way, that tells us exactly that. All he's now anxious for is the 300 million and get out of town, and we all hope that happens from very, very early.
I mean, he's obviously got his mindset on trying to save his other businesses and his other income, which is of course the high street, and there's going to be a long road ahead. I mean, shops reopening on Monday, of course, but we've already heard that Debenhams is closing in the Metro Centre, which of course Mike actually has 30% of. But his focus is literally going to be on all these main businesses. So I think the rumour that is going around at the minute is essentially that the only thing that's operational at the club is the first team, and that Mike Ashley has literally put the keys through the letterbox and walked off. And as you say, he's just waiting for his money to come into the bank.
I mean, in the meantime, though, we really stew because we're waiting for the new people to come in. How much can they do in the meantime regarding a manager, regarding signing players? Because yes, we've got 9 games to go, but very, very quickly we're into this short recession in the start of next season. And there's a lot of major decisions have got to be made at this club. And until the new landlords move in, how many of these decisions can be made? I mean, it even involves everybody at the top, like the manager, like Lee Charnley, literally everyone, and we need to make decisions and make them quick. Otherwise, we're going to play catch up. And I think it's in everybody's interest, and I would presume the Premier League as well, to get this sorted and let us all get on with our lives. And I remain in the belief that I cannot see how they're going to stop this, or whether they've got a great will to stop it. But they're certainly letting the lobbyists have a real fling at this thing, and it's whether that gains momentum at all. But we need an answer. We need an answer quickly. And if somebody is waiting in the background, we've got to start all over again through the whole procedure. So the limbo would be horrendous. For the sake of every Geordie, let's get this through the door.
Do you think it's been delayed because the Premier League has had more important things to do, John, i.e. Project Restart?
Yeah, I think that's come into it without a shadow of doubt. But I mean, it's also been in the hands of legal eagles separate from that. I think they didn't want to be seen to rush into a decision which was in Newcastle's favour and look to the lobbyists as though they hadn't seriously considered both the human rights and the TV piracy. But I think the main thing is the TV piracy that is bothering them because of the £1 million involved, etc., 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 and the other clubs objecting. And I've still got a feeling that behind the scenes, the Premier League are using the Newcastle United situation to say to the Saudis, look, you play ball with us and get this piracy stopped, and you can have Newcastle United. They're trying to do a deal, I believe, in private before they agree, because if they agree to Newcastle happening, then they've lost their big leverage in getting this piracy knocked on the head. And I think they're trying to see if they can get a deal that way, because for 2 years they've fought this piracy situation and got nowhere fast. And they probably think this is their best chance of getting some sort of result out of this. But it's amazingly frustrating.
It would make sense, really, as to why Richard Keys has been quite, an objective towards the takeover, because of course he works for the Qataris, he works for BN Sports, and his livelihood's probably on the line, because if the rumours are correct, Saudi are looking to buy in not just to Newcastle United, but also to buy into television coverage of the Premier League, and that would be massive for the Premier League, but it would also mean that BN Sports would be almost wiped off the face of the earth.
Well, if we haven't to listen to Keys anymore, I mean, I'll be quite happy with that, because he's been nothing but an irritant, like a fly buzzing around your head, for months now. And as you rightly said, Steve, he's so biased and has reasons to be so, that I don't take what he says with any credence whatsoever, because I don't think he's got any, and he certainly hasn't in this neck of the woods.
No, definitely not. But hopefully, as I keep saying, we're another day closer. And, obviously Amanda Staveley is currently, fighting another battle. She's busy dealing with the big case, which has been on the horizon for a few years now against Barclays. It's been interesting. I've never known as many Newcastle fans taking a court case. And I think the added bonus of the fact that you can actually watch the procedure, it's actually given fans an opportunity to see one of our potential new owners in the flesh, but also under pressure. And I think she's given a very good account of herself.
Well, I'm not too surprised. She's a very astute businesswoman, and she's been involved in many, many huge deals, not all football at all, hence Barclays, of course, but the Manchester City thing, etc. So she's not new to this sort of situation, and she has steel inside her to be a successful businesswoman. There's no question of that. And she's always going to look great if she's compared with Mike Ashley when he appeared in front of the MPs in London, if you can remember. They've made an absolute disaster of himself. So she's off a good mark up here.
Oh, yes, 100%. But we'll wish her well with that. And a lot of people asking whether we think that will delay the takeover, but it's two completely different issues, John. It's not going to affect.
Totally. And her involvement in court, she's not needed on daily service with this Premier League business that's going off at the moment. And of course, there's the Reuben brothers and the Saudis on top there anyway. So I don't think this has delayed the Premier League situation at all, or the suggestions that have been made in some quarters of her taking the eye off the ball. Not at all. There's nothing to be done on a daily basis with Newcastle United at this given moment until they move in and take charge of the keys. That hasn't happened yet. So this will not affect Newcastle United.
There's a lot of anxiety among supporters, in particular on social media with regards to players' contracts, John. And obviously we're in uncharted territory at the minute because, normally we'd be sitting back in the summer, waiting for transfers to come in or not, as the case is usually with Newcastle. But But essentially would be looking for, at the moment, we're looking at what's going to happen with the current players who are out of contract. And we have a few who are coming up to that position. Let's talk about Longstaff, in particular, Matty Longstaff, of course, the younger of the two brothers. We spoke about this when we did the show last time about contract. We're no further forward with that, with no comment from either side.
No, Udinese is in, as we know, with 30 grand a week bid, which can open a back door to Watford if it becomes necessary, because they're both owned by the same guys. Newcastle, 15 grand a week, stepped up to 20 grand a week. They've still got time to come with yet another offer, but the longer this goes on, the more you wonder what's going to happen. And of course, from Matty's point of view, there's so much in the air is Steve Bruce going to be his gaffer? Is somebody new going to be his gaffer, apart from the people above him? And how will they view him? And of course, there is the intriguing thought, Steve, that this Dan Balazer might become the new Geordie midfield hope at Newcastle next season, because all the reports of his performances with Rotherham in this last season, which has ended with them promoted and Sunderland not, goodness gracious me, has been absolutely outstanding. The kid has been outstanding. Shola Amiobi sent massive reports back saying how great he has done when he's been watched by him. And ironically, just before the lockdown, I was sitting at Gateshead in the director's box watching a game there, sitting with Peter Beardsley, and inevitably the conversation turned to the tune, and he was telling me about this Balazer and saying what a good prospect he is and what a good player he might well turn out to be. And this was when he was out of sight and out of mind at Rotherham, and was a little bit of a surprise to me. But Beardsley rates him, Amiobi rates him, he's 23, he's about the right age. Will he be the one, the Geordie one, that comes in and replaces Matty in the squad? I mean, I would like to think that they would both be there, but we don't know. As for the other two obvious fellas, Steve, that's up on contracts, which is Andy Carroll and Manquillo. Andy Carroll, I think it doesn't matter for me whether it's Steve Bruce in charge with Ashley or whether it's a new owner and a new manager. I cannot see any reason why Andy Carroll should be given a new contract for next season. He hasn't scored on his return, and I know he hasn't played that many because it's the old problem of the injury. He is regularly injured. His history of recent years tells you that. And as a result of all these injuries, physically, he has aged beyond his years. And it's a harsh old world, football, but I don't think he's got much left to give us, and I can't see any justification for him to have a contract and take a shirt number next season, harsh that may be. So I can't see him being with us come a new season starting.
You know, I would have to agree on Andy Carroll. I mean, you know, from my perspective, I was shocked to see him being linked with a return. I did go on record as saying I felt it was a PR stunt. And nothing that has happened in the course of this season has changed my mind. Andy's a lovely guy. You know, in his pomp when he was coming through at Newcastle, you know, he had it all at his feet, and he could have, you know, we all hoped that he was going to stay and make the number 9 shirt his own and go on to make history. But unfortunately, as history tells us, you know, £35 million from Liverpool took him to Anfield, and you know, that would be a great deal for him. Not so much a good deal for Liverpool, but a great deal for Mike Ashley as well.
Yes, it was. Yes, it was. And the old Carroll, as we say, was a force to be reckoned with. But as so often happens, especially if you play the number 9 shirt the way he played, i.e. the physicality of his whole game, you end up with injuries, and he's ended up with a barrel load of injuries. And to be truthful, I mean, I was looking at the record of Newcastle United strikers this season, just looking at them here. Carroll's started for 9 others as sub, no goals. Muto, no goals, 2 starts, 5 subs. Gale, no goals, 4 starts, 8 subs. Joelinton, 27 starts plus 2 as sub, 1 goal. Our through-the-middle strikers have just not done it. And quite frankly, you could afford to clear out the whole lot of them and start again. I mean, physically, that won't happen, I would suggest, because they won't want to get rid of 5 or 4 and have to get 4 in. But there's none of their record is the reason why Newcastle have had a fight on their hands all season, because the strikers' records have been nothing short of shocking. And I'm afraid Andy will pay a price for that. Manquillo, by the way, the other guy, who looked as if his career was dead and buried a few months ago, he was just playing out time, has somewhat revived himself and has been a better all-round player, dare I say it, for me, than Yedlin, because Joelinton might have great pace going forward, but he's not saying 100 dash. And defensively, both position-wise and ability-wise defensively, has an awful lot that he's short of. I'm not suggesting that the best answer would be to buy a quality right-back, but certainly if the choice and contracts didn't come into it between Manquillo and Joelinton at the moment, I think Manquillo would get the vote.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Manquillo, he didn't let Rafa down, and he certainly hasn't let Steve Bruce down. And there's been a definite improvement in team performances when he's been there. Certainly more balanced. I would have to agree. And it seems as if it was 100 years ago that we were actually watching these games. But
it does, doesn't it?
Starting to refresh yourself with it. You mentioned Joelinton there. Joelinton, obviously, another interview with the Evening Chronicle. At the start of the week, and similar tone to what we saw in the past. From Joelinton, which is he doesn't put too much pressure on himself, and doesn't really seem to think that goals are important. And when we spoke to Malcolm MacDonald this week, Malcolm was essentially saying, if that was a player in the dressing room of me and I was the manager, I would kick him out of the dressing room, because to say goals aren't important when you're wearing the number 9 shirt at Newcastle is quite frankly laughable.
Well, it's absolutely staggering, and it doesn't matter where you play along the front line. If you've taken part in 29 league games this season and got 1 goal, which was back in August, then you should be panicking. He's done in that interview, Steve, he went on about how he believes his Newcastle career is just at the beginning, not at the end, that he's excited by it, that this, that, and the other is going to happen. But of course, that's what you've got to say. 24 hours later, Muto was coming out in today's paper and saying that, goals are important and I want to start scoring goals, etc., etc. It's easy to talk. We haven't played since March the 7th, and we're not playing until June the 21st. In the meantime, it's easy to talk because there's no games lost. If Joelinton and Muto were capable of doing what they talk about, we'd all be perfectly all right. But quite frankly, it hasn't been like that. Ironically, Steve, I think that Joelinton might well benefit by coming back into empty stadiums, because he's not going to hear 50,000 collective sighs from Geordies every time he doesn't get into the box with aggression and intent, or when he puts a chance wide. He might well benefit by the sterile atmosphere that there's going to be, in a way like I think Maximum won't. He loves the atmosphere. He loves the crowd getting excited about his excitement that he creates on the field. He feeds off that interaction. Joelinton might become happier because of it, but whether he'll become 6 or 7 goals more happy, I very much doubt. But it might be an easier task for him, but that's not the answer long term, of course. It's our lack of goals individually. Do you realise, I was just looking up the records today, that with 9 matches to go, Newcastle United could end up with the worst top goal scorer record in the club's history, which is over 100 years. The worst top goal scoring record in the club's history is 6, which was done on 2 occasions. Barnes did it back in the 90s, and I think Carl Court and someone else, which I've got down here, I think Carl Court and Nobby Solano back in 2001 scored 6. Only in the league goals only, not the cups. And they are the worst record in the whole lot. Now you've got Shelby with 5. And he's the obvious one to top it, but he's got to score 2 in the last 9 games, and he only played 16 starts beforehand. He's not a regular, and he is a midfielder. He's done exceptionally well to have 5 goals, but is he going to score another 2? Maybe. But next, after that, everybody's got 2. So they to get up to 7 to beat so when it's not the worst season, they've got to score 5 goals in 9 games. Any one of those on 2s which includes Almere and the maximum, as well as a shoal of centre-halves, they've got to score 5 goals or 7. If Joelinton's got to do it, he's got to score 6 goals in 9 games. Now, I've got a feeling that he won't do that. But you never know. If Muto's we'll get crazily absurd here. If Muto's going to do it, Andy Carroll's going to do it, they've got to score 7 in 9. So Newcastle could end up with the worst goal-scoring top scorer in the history of the club, which is absolutely. I think there's only Shelby can stop that being the case. If Shelby can get 2 in the next run-in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we've played a couple of games. Newcastle's A squad, if you like, played Newcastle's B squad, 1-1 draw. Joelinton scored. And then the second game, of course, was against Middlesbrough, where we found ourselves 2-0 down. But then, we had a rally in the second half, which finished with Joelinton grabbing the winner in the 90th minute. So you might be right, John. Playing without a crowd might suit Joelinton more.
Aye, Muto scored in that game as well, I believe. And I think Joelinton scored in a few at the very beginning of this season, which is the longest season I've ever known, because it's still going on in June, July. He scored pre-season goals. I think there's a big difference between scoring pre-season or in a friendly game and actually do it in a league game. But I do think that Joelinton can benefit by the rather sterile way we're going to come back into football, where, to be truthful, being home or away makes no difference. Because you're playing in an empty stadium. So it's going to be interesting. We need, it's been suggested, Steve, 2 wins to make certain we don't go down. I mean, I don't think for 1 second that Newcastle United are going to go down or are in real danger of going down. But let us get those 2 victories as soon as possible to take the pressure off. And really, the start of the Premier League season gives us a real opportunity, because we've got Sheffield United home, if it matters. But we won at Sheffield United. So while they're a good side, we won at Sheffield United. And then we've got Aston Villa and Bournemouth. So in those 3 games, it is possible to get 2 wins and take the pressure off completely. Buried in that lot as well, of course, we've got the FA Cup tie with Man City, which is a totally different ball game. But it would be nice to somehow squeeze through that and then get the pressure off the relegation situation. I don't expect us to go down. I mean, I think Norwich are dead, and there's another 2 teams beneath us who are in a bigger mess than we are, if you like, whether you want that to be Villa or Bournemouth or Brighton, who have been going one way, and that's downwards with their results just before everything closed. So I think we're going to be okay, but the sooner the better. But I'm looking for a double, mate. I'm looking to finish the season on a high with a double. And one is that Ashley's out of town, and the other is that we've got a goal scorer with more than 6 goals at the end of the season, so it's not our worst goal scoring record. That's a double that Gibbo would celebrate with a little white wine.
How important is it, having a packed St James's Park then, do you think? Because obviously, we've lost a lot of fans this season, 10,000 fans. Yeah. Longer season ticket holders. Obviously, Mike Ashley and Lee Charnley obviously gave tickets away to 10,000 people to try and increase the atmosphere. But now we're going to have no fans there, John. You've already mentioned St Maximum thrives off that. We've talked about Joelinton possibly benefiting from the fact that there won't be people sighing and moaning around him. How important is it? Do you think games like Sheffield United, or the quarter final against Man City, probably, where we always tend to have that fantastic atmosphere when there's a big game and there's a lot riding at stake? How important is it going to be when we won't have those fans? Do you think it'll be like, we often say it's like having a goal's head start? Will this be like starting a goal behind?
Well, it's a very good point, Steve, because when the Newcastle crowd is at its normal, it is a 12th man without a shadow of doubt. There's been a strange atmosphere this season in the ground. Before the takeover was underway and everybody was depressed and 10,000 were staying away, there could be a lot of silence, which was unbelievable. But when there's optimism, when there is belief, when the crowd want to know, when they're encouraged by the performance on the pitch, which we've had some good this year, but we haven't had many good performances. There is a huge difference. But the crowd at St James's Park has always been a wonderful, wonderful asset. And I was hopeful if this season had gone on uninterrupted and the crowd was still there, and when everybody was enthusiastic about the takeover, because it seemed as if it was going to happen quick, the atmosphere would have come pouring back into St James's Park. And there's no question that the crowd not only is it a lift to Newcastle, but it was produced apprehension in the opposition. There's no question. And certainly where I believe the crowd will be missed will be in the FA Cup tie with Manchester City, because the quarterfinals, you can smell Wembley. Wembley's the next stop in the semis and then the final. And we've never had a cup run for all the time Ashley's been here. The atmosphere in that game would have been huge, and the crowd would have been 100% behind Newcastle. We will miss that, and that will be a disadvantage against the side of the quality of Man City. I also think, that when you have a live game, not just at St James's Park, but anywhere, subconsciously referees can be affected by giving decisions against the home side, or giving a home side, they're apprehensive of doing that, giving the home side a free kick that's debatable. It becomes natural. In a sterile atmosphere where there's no crowd, no reaction to anything you do, I don't think the home side might get the advantage. And I'm not suggesting referees are homers on, it's just human nature. There's nobody baying for the free kick or whatever. So yes, it's a disadvantage. But then again, Newcastle can travel away and not face the wrath of the crowd where they're going. There's that side to it as well. So it's going to be swings and roundabouts. But we're going to miss it in the FA Cup. I really do think that's so.
Yeah, Malcolm made the point on the show this week about Man United, Liverpool, Newcastle, being the grounds that will be affected the most, because they do rely on the home atmosphere. So it's a point well made. We'll find out, of course, on the 21st of this month, how badly Newcastle have missed the atmosphere, and that will be interesting. Getting on to the club again itself. Obviously, the Newcastle United Supporters Trust have now submitted another letter, asking and requesting the club sort out the season ticket issue. Obviously, there's people who've paid, like myself, for season tickets, and obviously quarter-final cup tickets have been paid for. But we've had no response from the club as to what's actually going to happen with this money. Is it down to the takeover, or is it just the case that Ashley's literally just walked away from the club and he's waiting, and this is the new owner's responsibility?
Well, that's the sadness, because it falls between two stools. Ashley is unquestionably thought. I mean, he's never been a fan of it in the whole of his time here, and that is why the fans feel about him in exactly the same way. He's, as you rightly used the expression, he's put the keys through the letterbox and he's walked away, washed his hands on it, said, "I just want 300 million. All the problems that are up there aren't my problems anymore." His PR has always been absolutely shocking, but it can get worse as far as he's concerned, if that's at all possible. Morally, what he's done with Newcastle United fans beggars belief. It is an absolute unmitigated disgrace. But regularly is faced accusations from his own staff at Sports Direct about things that haven't been correct there. So this is nothing new. And it's very easy to say, well, this is the problem of the new owners, except for one thing. They're not the new owners. They're the prospective new owners. They cannot solve this at the moment because legally they're not allowed to, because they don't own Newcastle United. This should be taken care of by Ashley. And the fact that it hasn't been is absolutely an outrage, an absolute outrage, to such an extent that you feel that somebody in authority should step in and say, excuse me, Newcastle United, you've got to get this sorted. But I believe the Premier League are too busy trying to sort out somebody's ownership and whether football should restart to be able to put their finger in another pie. They can't juggle two balls, so they're not going to juggle three. But it is absolutely horrendous, and is yet another reason why we need this man out of town, as if there wasn't enough already.
Yeah, well, let's go back to the start of the season. Rafa had left and Steve Bruce had come in. What would Gibbo's assessment be of how the season's gone as we come into the the final furlong? Is it a case of we did better than you thought we would, or is it a case of we should have done better?
It's a good question. Certainly in terms of results and our current standing in the league and on the verge of getting rid of any threat of relegation, Steve Bruce, under the circumstances, has done as well as he would expect to, probably a bit better than Newcastle United supporters expected him to, although a vast majority wouldn't give him that credit. It has got to be said, with the limited resources, with the lack of firepower up front, results have been decent as we could expect. What hasn't been, and what really gets up the noses of fans, is that the performances have been exceptionally iffy and exceptionally dour and unattractive, which is not the Newcastle way. I honestly don't think that we've done any worse, and I think we've done better than I was expecting at the beginning of the season, not because of Steve Bruce's ability or inability, but because of the atmosphere he came into, where the owner was hated, a manager that was absolutely adored had been allowed to walk away, and therefore the new manager was going to be seen as the owner's patsy. When you're going to work under those circumstances, you are tied like a Houdini and thrown in the Tyne to shouts of swim. So it was going to be horrendous. We have kept our head above water. For that, I'm eternally grateful. That's good news. The way we've played has been anything but good news. It's been dour to watch. A few results we've scraped late in the day to get victories and wonder how on earth we did that. But at the end of the day, we were all left with the feeling that as long as Mike Ashley is manager, we are going to have this hand-to-mouth existence season after season after season. Whoever is the manager, next season would be no different to this season, and the season afterwards would be no different. We've got to get a different mentality into the club that can only come from the top, and that can only come with the removal of Mike Ashley.
This week has seen the birthday anniversary of a great man in Newcastle United's history, the late, great Joe Harvey.
Indeed.
A fantastic guy, John. Tell us about your memories of Joe.
Wonderful guy. I mean, it's been a superb week for me, because the only thing that's good about age is that I managed to be in Budapest in 1969. Which is terrific. And it was the 51st anniversary yesterday, on the 11th, 51st anniversary of Newcastle United winning the Fairs Cup, with such a stirring comeback against Ujpest in Budapest. On that night, Joe Harvey had his 51st birthday and John McNamee had his 28th birthday. Joe, bless him, naturally is no longer with us. John Hazen was 78 or what, yesterday. God bless him, not in the best of health, but our thoughts all go out to him. As for Joe Harvey, he is one of the great men of Newcastle United history. A wonderful, wonderful skipper of the side that won the cup in 51 and 52. A lot of people don't realise he was a coach in 55 with the first team and travelled with the first team when they won the cup again. And then as a manager, he won the European Fairs Cup. He won 2 Takeover Cups, which are the Anglo-Scottish Cup. He won the Anglo-Italian Cup, beating Fiorentina and Florence to win it, which takes him down and got us to the FA Cup final. His record was absolutely outstanding. He was a fearsome character with a heart of gold. He could blister paint at 50 yards if anyone crossed him, but he could put his hand round somebody's shoulder and make them feel 10 foot tall. His man management was superb and was cut to each individual. With Supermark, his man management was to say, you bandy-legged so-and-so, you're a tosser, you should score 3 goals on Saturday. Smoke would come out the ears, he would go and score 3 on Saturday, and then Joe would give him a kiss and say, told you, son. With Hibby, it was exactly the opposite. He needed an arm round the shoulder, a kiss. He used to give him a fag as he walked off the training ground. Can you imagine a manager giving a player a fag? He used to give him a fag, and Joe would light up as well, and he would say, you're my little diamond, son. You are the team. You make the team tick. And Hibby was ready to run through a brick wall. MacDonald, held in a totally different way, was ready to run through a brick wall. Surprise, surprise, they both adored him, loved him to pieces. And players did. He had that wonderful ability to manage and to pick a player. He had a wonderful eye for ability, in the same way as Kevin Keegan did have later when he got the entertainers together. He could see talent, and he brought so many wonderful players. MacDonald was only 21, had never played in top flight, come to us and become a legend. Hibby was playing for Leeds Reserves. Terry Hibbard was playing at Bury and went on and won the European Cup 3 times with Liverpool. Tony Green was at Blackpool. He found players who weren't doing anything at that particular time with the club and turned them into stars. He could see that. And afterwards, when he was made a scout after he finished, he went up to Scotland and looked at 2 players and come back to Gordon Lee and said that we should sign these 2 young lads who are playing in the backwaters in Scotland. And Gordon Lee said, I don't like Scottish League players. I'm not going to sign Scottish League players. And it was Andy Gray, the centre forward, and it was Alan Hansen at Liverpool that Joe recommended for Newcastle. But we didn't like Scottish League players and we didn't sign them. Joe could see players, could see talent, and knew how to handle them. Couldn't coach, but that didn't matter. You didn't have to coach. Brian Clough couldn't coach, but he could off-manage. You can get a coach to coach. If you can manage, then you'll get the job done. He was a wonderful man, and bless him, we should remember him this particular week, because not only is he the last manager to win a meaningful trophy, 1969, but he was also the skipper that went to Wembley and won trophies. And by the way, since the early 50s, we haven't won a domestic trophy either. So he looms very, very large, does Joe, in our history. And I was lucky to know him, of course, because I did my job well and he did his job well. We clashed from time to time because what was in my interest was not necessarily in his. But we both knew that we had the same love, i.e. Newcastle United, and therefore no grudges were felt. And the next day was all forgotten and we got on with the job, which was loving our club, because he was, without question, an adopted Geordie, and a privilege to have worked with him.
Great recollections. And I, when I spoke to Malcolm MacDonald earlier this week about Joe, it was very similar. But I mean, I also remember, when we worked very hard to get some kind of monument at the ground, and we ended up, I think, between the Fairs Club and myself and Danny Cox, I think we raised the 10 grand to get the plaque that we ended up at the Gallagher. But there's a lot of momentum, it has to be said, amongst the support that once the takeover goes through, that Joe is remembered in a much better way. And I think, whether that's the renaming of a stand, or whether that's another monument or statue that goes up outside the ground, I think that would be the perfect thing to do, because Joe Harvey deserves a lot more than what he's got at the ground at the minute.
Steve, I couldn't agree more with you. And we've got to bear in mind that the only reason he's got anything at the ground at all is because of supporters who raised the money and that plaque went up. And when I look, there's a statue of Jackie Milburn up there in my Joe, so there should be. But outside of that, there's a statue of Bobby Robson, who I adore to pieces. There's no question about that, and a wonderful manager and a wonderful Newcastle fan. But if you wanted to be harsh, you could say he didn't win anything. Our top goal scorer statue, Alan Shearer, is outside the ground because the current regime wouldn't have it inside the ground. And what we've got for Joe is nowhere near big enough. So there's things to be rectified, and not least the relationships with Alan Shearer himself and Kevin Keegan himself, who were both disrespected by Mike Ashley and need to be brought in as ambassadors. We have got to cherish people that are part of our history and have done so much for this club, whether it's Joe Harvey, whether it's Alan Shearer, whether it's Jackie Milburn, Super Mac, or anyone else. We have got to cherish these. And perhaps when we look at things that have happened in recent times, when we've had this long run without winning anything, we've got to cherish them so much more. And hopefully the PR, the very easy thing for new owners to do, whoever they are, Steve, is to realise that the PR has got to be ramped up 100%. Start looking after your old heroes. Start looking after your fans, and you're 3/4 of the way down the road towards success. And I think anybody coming in won't be stupid enough to ignore that.
Yeah, good point. Talking about new owners, John, you've covered and watched Newcastle a lot more than many supporters. You're a fan first and foremost, a journalist second. You've always maintained that, and it's quite clear to hear that. A lot of the comments we get whenever we do a show together are always, "I love listening to Gibbo," and it's no wonder, because it's listening to a passionate fan. What would you like to see from new owners, John? You've already said PR communication is important, but what is the first and most important thing, and what else do they need to do?
Well, of course, that is one of the first ones they must do. It is the easiest one as well. If you're clever, the easiest one's to look after fans and look after your old heroes. That's the easy part. There's loads. I mean, first and foremost, decisions have got to be made over the manager long term, whether that is in the summer or in a year's time. Whoever comes in always produces their own manager. You want a director of football and a chief executive to get things rolling and going, and you've got to sign well. And if it is not the manager these days, and it often isn't, it's often the director of football, you've got to have somebody with a good eye for talent. You've got to have somebody with the eye that Joe Harvey had, the eye that Kevin Keegan had when he was buying the entertainers, and the eye that Newcastle United had when they bought Joelinton at 40 million. It's got to go down the chute, because that was not value for money. And Ashley, who treasures every pound he's ever had in his pocket, must be thrilled with that deal, the way it's worked out. But we've got to get that right. And then you've got to look behind the scenes. You've got to do something about the training ground. State-of-the-art gym, the actual training ground itself. You've got to bring St James's Park up to scratch. It was a wonderful ground when it was first developed on a Hall coming in, and that was his business with Cameron Hall Developments. And Newcastle's ground then was magnificent. Time has moved on, and nothing's moved on at St James's Park, and that needs doing as well. So there's the immediate future, where you've got to get the manager, the signings, and the backroom staff sorted. And then there's the long-term future, looking at St James's Park, the academy, what you do with the academy, because Newcastle going away and spending 15 million, a world record fee to bring Alan Shearer home when you had him on trial and let him go, paying a fee twice to buy Peter Beardsley when you had him on trial and let him go. Willie McFall, who I was talking to this week, who's 22 years with Newcastle United as a goalkeeper and a manager. I had forgotten that he was on trial at Newcastle United way back when Charlie Mitten was manager and was allowed to go. Then we brought him in and he served here for 22 years. But local boys, we should be able to sign, not all of them, but a vast majority of them, and be happy and delighted and nourish them and make them into something. Don't treat them like Waddle, Beardsley and Gascoigne, who all was sold within about a year and a half, all Geordies, all England internationals, all destined to be superstars. We took the coin. They quickly saw a lack of ambition and so were happy enough to get out of the club. We took the coin and lo and behold, we were relegated. What a surprise. Let us learn from the history, get things right. I don't think the new owners will come in and do a Man City and just buy, and Chelsea when Abramovich come in and just buy willy-nilly with loads of money, because those sort of days aren't quite here anymore. It'll be a shrewdness of buying the right people and building up. But we've got to get that underway. I believe that the homework has been done, if the owners are the ones that are on the cards at the moment. There's a lot of work to be done, but if they start quickly, get out the blocks quickly and get the fans on side, it's amazing how quickly we can move forward. We moved forward with Kevin Keegan from the brink of going into the old third division to be Premier League runners-up 2 successive seasons in what was relatively and it can be done again. And my God, if there's fans that deserve it, for the loyalty that's been shown since 1969, since 1955 with the domestic trophy, and 1927 for the league, the loyalty of fans, 50,000 every home game, Geordies, they deserve to be. The first thing that they've got to do, the new owners, is give the fans hope. The next thing is give them trophies, but give them hope. That's the first thing.
100%, John. I couldn't agree more. A topic I did bring up with Malcolm as well was the number 9 shirt, and obviously the current incumbent isn't covering himself in glory, as we've already talked about today, Joelinton. Should that shirt be given away as easily as it was at the start of the season, John, or should it be earned? I noticed there's a few supporters talking about it online this week that, you know, maybe that's the part of the pressure for Joelinton that he's wearing this number 9 shirt. And, you know, there's been some great names in it. We've mentioned most of them today, but Shearer, Milburn, Len White, you know, Hughie Gallagher. The list is endless, but there's also a few duffers in there, you know, who weren't fit to wear the shirt. So that's the question, really. You know, should Joelinton move on, or he decides, you know, that he's had enough and does go to another club, and that shirt becomes vacant again. Obviously, if it's a Harry Kane, then, you know, it's a no-brainer that you would give it to a player of his.
Of course.
If it's not who's proven, would you say it has to be earned, John?
To wear it regularly has got to be earned. At some stage, you've got to give it to somebody. You can't just sort of semi-retire the number 9 shirt. And supposing we started next season with no new owners and with basically the squad we've got, who the heck would you give the number 9 shirt to? That's current. We've just talked about the goal-scoring records of all the strikers through the middle, from Dwight Gale to Muto to Andy Carroll and to Joelinton. Somebody's got to have the shirt, and you can deal with the theory that when it was given to Joelinton, it was the club's record signing at 40 million, twice as much as the last record signing, 20 million for Almiron. So he should be capable of wearing the shirt. And I believe when he come, the weight of that shirt initially didn't weigh on his shoulders because he had no idea the history of the number 9 shirt when he first signed for Newcastle United. It might well have become apparent to him now without a shadow of doubt. But, I mean, next season, if Joelinton stays with Newcastle, and you've got a feeling that he will, because, well, who's going to buy him at anything like the money we paid for him on his current record? Then you've got to take the number 9 shirt off him. They took it off a great number 9 called Les Ferdinand when they got a greater number 9 called Alan Shearer and gave Ferdinand the 10 shirt or whatever. You can't move Joelinton off the 9 shirt, and I would move him off the number 9 shirt next season. Give him any number you want if he's staying at the club. He is not a centre forward, apart from and he's not a goal scorer. So if you're not a centre forward and you're not a goal scorer, what the heck are you doing in a number 9 shirt? And really, I would rather give it to anyone else. But the simple answer is me having told you that goal-scoring record of all our strikers, which is horrendous. The first thing we've got to do in the summer is buy a striker who scores goals. And presumably that would be the guy you would give the number 9 shirt to. A one that already scores goals. Joelinton has no goal-scoring record. Muto has no goal-scoring record. And since he left Newcastle United, Andy Carroll has never made double figures as a goal scorer since he left Newcastle United in the league. So buy somebody that can score goals and give him number 9 shirt. But whatever happens, don't leave it in the possession of Joelinton next season. That would be horrendous, and that would be not only would fans be outraged because he isn't in number 9, but it would be to bury Joelinton. You may as well bury him if you leave him wearing that shirt another season.
We'll finish off, John, this week with just a look ahead to what's going to be a pretty hectic end of the season. I mean, we're talking the 21st of June, so obviously we're kicking off a little bit later than other teams. Then we have a succession of games over a month, which 9 games, I think, in total, which includes the FA Cup quarter-final.
9 plus the FA Cup.
Ever the optimist, we could be looking at another couple of games, of course, if we got to the semi and the final. So, it's a big concern for injuries, John. I mean, we had a poor injury record this season. Yeah. A lot of soft tissue injuries, which has all been covered as well. Is that a concern? I mean, it's already been rumoured that Sean Longstaff might miss out, from the Sheffield United game. Talking about Matty not being available. There's 2 players already who might not be available straight away.
Oh, I think it's a great concern. As you rightly say, Steve, Newcastle's record on injury-wise is abysmal. The only thing it has done for us, this break, is give us Dubravka back, who for me is the most consistent player of the whole season, who might have been out for the rest of the season if it had continued, but is now could end up as an ever-present this season, because he's the only one that's ever present at the moment. He's played 29 out of 29, and he could end up as an ever-present because it's give us Dummett, as long as we're allowed back, who was finished for the season, as long as he's allowed to come back, Newcastle can change their squad and put him back in it. Not certain yet whether they can do that. But there is a concern over injuries. Of that, there's no question. But that applies to everyone. It doesn't just apply to Newcastle. We could be playing sides who were woefully under strength towards the end of the 9-game run, because it's 9 in the league, Steve, plus Man City, 10, and plus 2 more if we made the final. And it is going to be, but everybody is in the same boat. It is a concern for us because we seem to get more injuries than our fair share. But we've just got to get on with it. There's nothing we can do about it now at this late stage of life. As I say, we've got the goalkeeper back, and possibly Dummett, if we're allowed to have him back, that we didn't have. And I don't want to have a go at Carl Darlow whatsoever, because the lad is a nice lad and is quite competent. But Dubravka is exceptional. And if our limited goals have got us a few points, he's got us more points in the goals that he's kept out at the other end. Of course, he'll make a rick. That's what goalkeepers do, because you're the last line of defence. You make a mistake and the ball's in the back of the net. But my Jove, he's done well for me this season, and I'm very, very grateful to have him here with the great attitude he's got. So let us, because of all these games, Steve, let us get the points quickly. We've got a good start. If you've got Sheffield United, even if you take them out, we've got Villa and Bournemouth. If we beat Villa and Bournemouth, we are virtually safe with two wins, and we've denied them points, and they're in the relegation slots at the moment. Villa and Bournemouth are on the bottom three at the moment. So we can take a huge step before we get sucked in by injuries to safety by going and beating Villa and Bournemouth in 2 of our first 3 games.
Great stuff as always, John. Fantastic and great to have you on. Thanks for giving up a bit of your time, and hopefully get you on next week, John, to look ahead to the first game.
Absolutely, my friends. Been an absolute pleasure to talk to you as normal, Steve. See you next week, my friend.
Great stuff. Thanks very much for watching, folks. Good night, and I will be back tomorrow with another guest on NUFC Matters.